It's been over 9 months since Russia invaded Ukraine, with fierce fighting taking place on the battlefield, at sea and in the sky. Large-scale weapons are often viewed as having the biggest impact in this conflict. But in this modern war, it's often the smallest weapons that are bringing some of the biggest gains. This is in the form of drones. I spoke to drone expert Professor Sarah Kreps, Director of the Tech Policy Institute at Cornell University, about how drones are revolutionising the modern battlefield.
The Ukrainians are using a switchblade, and the Russians are using, it appears to be Iranian-made loitering munitions. Where the TB2 was very successful early in the war was that the Russians had not established air superiority or air defenses. And so they had miscalculated on a number of different levels, including that they did not anticipate that their tanks would get stuck in the mud. And so what that meant was that with the absence of air defenses, and as their convoys were getting stuck in the mud, these TB2s, these Turkish-made drones, were, I think, incredibly successful in targeting the convoys and leading to some of those early losses that made it quite clear that the Russians were not going to have an easy time of that. And I think what that then did, the knock-on effect of that, was that it looked like these reinforcements, the external assistance to the Ukrainians was very successful. And I think success was then begetting more success by eliciting more aid from the West. So then, as it looked early on, like this, that the Ukrainians might not get crushed, there was kind of a bandwagon effect that then led to more assistance. So then I think what then happened is that as the Russians kind of adapted to it, and developed some air defenses, those TB2s became quite vulnerable because they fly low and slow. The Russians have been using these Iranian-made loitering munitions. They send 30 into the capital, 5 get through. It's an 85% fail rate, but it's a 15% success rate, and they haven't lost a lot. And the effect on the damaging effect on Ukrainian infrastructure and morale, I think, is not trivial. President Biden just pushed for another $39 billion in aid. So at $6,000 a pop for one of these switchblades, you can buy a lot of switchblades for $39 billion. So I think they're still fine there. And the Russians this week or recently had borrowed another $13 billion. So actually, in terms of cost effectiveness, these are much more effective than, let's say, a $1 million cruise missile. The reason why these kamikaze drones are effective is that they are so small that they're really hard to defend against. So our what we think of as kind of a traditional system of air defenses, they're looking for much larger platforms. What would be referred to as a larger radar cross-section. And these are so small that they're really difficult to identify, A, and then B, shoot down. And so what I would imagine is the next step of this process this campaign is for both sides to be identifying and locating some kind of air defense that can help shoot these smaller kamikazes or the switchblade in the case of the Ukrainian platforms, or the Shahed in the case of the Russians, to protect against those, so that even if just 15%, so that it goes from 15% getting through to more like 5%. Sea drones are certainly a capability that seems like it could have some utility. But I think what we see evidence of is that both sides are always trying to get an advantage in whatever way they can. And so when that sea drone was used a few weeks ago, it was relatively unexpected because the Russians were looking for something in the air. And so it's not surprising if you can do these kinds of attacks from the air, you can also do them in a maritime context. And so again, what I think they're trying to do is a multi-pronged attack across different domains and try to gain an advantage. Whether drones can be hacked has been a source of discussion. I think where they're more likely to be vulnerable is to jamming, so that they just stop working and functioning. So you can just jam the data link so that they're not capable of actually flying the mission that they're tasked to fly. So one of the big limitations with drones is just that they are susceptible. They're vulnerable to air defenses. And so right now, those air defenses are themselves a limitation. But as those improve, the rate of success of these drones will go down. And so what they need to do next, I think, drones are here to stay for the reasons of the payoff in terms of financially and in terms of sparing loss of life. But they do need to improve in terms of their vulnerability to air defenses. So I think that will be the next step. What we see on the US side is shifting toward kind of greater stealth, greater maneuverability, to try to address some of those vulnerabilities and deficiencies in the current technology.